Good afternoon, folks. Today is Wednesday, October 14th, 2020. We're here for the Miami-Dade TPO's Freight Transportation Advisory Committee meeting for October. Let's go to the next slide. Just so you know, right now we have a total of four members already logged on, so it will constitute a quorum. And so once we get to that point, we'll have everybody do a roll call and such. We do not have the chair, Barbara Pimentel, or the vice chair, Juan Flores, currently logged in, but I'm sure they will log in soon enough. Let's see if I can just make sure that I have everybody's names here. They're not sure. Okay, attendees. Okay. Rules of engagement. This is a public meeting and it's being recorded. If you experience any technical difficulties, please contact Lisa Wan at 7954-716-8823 or the email address you see on the screen. Any of the members of the public, you will remain muted throughout the duration of this meeting, except for the public comments. If you wish to provide a comment, please use the raise hand button. Excuse me. The raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom panel so that the meeting organizer can unmute your microphone. If you're calling in, the organizer will automatically unmute your microphone when the public comment period begins. Please proceed by first providing your full name and home address, followed by your comment. Committee members, if you wish to provide a comment, please use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Wait to be recognized by the chair. Once recognized by the chair, please provide your name and question and comment. Committee members are encouraged to enable their web cameras to unmute their microphones when not speaking. To move or amend a notion, unmute your microphone, clearly state your name for the record, and propose or second the motion. The FTAC coordinator will record the action and verbally confirm your name. Open such votes as approval of the agenda, and such will be called by calling dissenting votes only. Go to the next slide, please.
Hey, Kevin. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Barbara. Thanks to see you.
Sorry.
No problem. So Barbara is here. If anybody else came in, all right. So, Barbara, I just finished going over the rules of engagement. So now we're about to call the meeting to order. The time right now is 2:05 p.m. And you, like I said, you came in just in time. So, Barbara, it's now for you for approval of agenda and roll call.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, guys. I apologize. I've been trying for the last 10 minutes to sign on. For some reason, I kept getting directed to a different way of opening the Zoom because it had this link with the sync with the Skype, and it was horrible. So I had to I apologize for that. Hold on, because I have to open my agenda because I haven't, it's been, oh, hold on. I don't even have the agenda. It's one of those days today. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, because I'm trying to get it on my other computer so I can open it up. But well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We want to go ahead and call the meeting to order. So our committee members that are online with us, if you can go ahead and have an approval of the agenda. Actually,
hold on, Barbara. We're going to do the roll call first.
Oh, okay.
All right. So starting off with the chairperson, just when I call your name, just unmute yourself and say here, in case I can't see you on the screen. Chairperson Barbara Pimentel.
Here.
Vice Chair Juan Flores. Bill Arata.
Here.
George Corzo.
Here.
John Dome.
Here.
Willie Marr.
He was there.
Yeah, I did see him.
Yeah.
Oh, here. Okay. Oh, I was muted.
No problem. All right, good. Stanley just joined us, I see. Rose Martinez.
Here.
And Stanley Rigaud.
Stanley's muted.
Stanley, unmute yourself and
yes,
say.
Okay. I'm here. Sorry for being a little late. Just got off a panel.
No problem. All right, so we have everybody here with the exception of one, so we're almost full. All right, so go ahead. Gavel's back to you, Barbara.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and since we've done roll call, going to call the meeting to order. Committee members, approval of the agenda for today's meeting.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second, Barbie.
Thank you so much. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. All right. If you had a chance to review the minutes, we'd like to go ahead and get approval of the minutes.
Motion.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Okay, off to the next item. Any public comments from anybody, all the committee members? Do we have any public comments? Come on, open up. There you go. Nope. Isn't it? No? No comments?
Going once,
All
going
right.
twice.
Going once, going twice, sold. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and move on to the next item. I'm having trouble opening up my agenda on my computer, so I'm apologize. I have to follow what's on the screen here. So I'm going to go ahead. The FDOT truck parking engineering analysis. Who's going to be presenting? I can't see the presenter. Is that Carlos?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Carlos. How you doing?
I'm well, and yourself?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. All right, great. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and friends of the committee. Once again, I'm here to present on truck parking, your favorite subject.
Yeah.
I know we have been talking about this for quite some time. You all have been talking about this longer than I have been at this job, so it's refreshing to have some continuity, I should say, on those champions. In any case, I'm gonna avoid boring you to death with our mission statement. So I'm gonna skip the mission statement and mission and values. I already talked to you about that, and I'm gonna get right into the agenda. Before I actually start telling you, about this effort, I want to put it in perspective and kind of refresh your memory as to some of the work that's been done in terms of truck parking, dating back to 2010. To those that have been around for that long, that have been talking about this very same subject, you may have recalled a Board of County Commissioners resolution dating back to 2010, specifically Resolution 5310, that essentially directed the Miami-Dade TPO to look at truck parking, to quantify the supply and demand and develop some steps for addressing truck parking issue. And the Miami-Dade TPO actually moved along at that time. Back in 2010, it came up with a initial study. And it was actually titled, and I'm going to quote it here, the Comprehensive Parking Study for Freight Transfer in Miami-Dade County. That's what we have been calling for quite some time, the Miami-Dade TPO Phase 1 study. And again, it was completed in 2010. That resolution from the Board of County Commissioners was early January 2010. By the end of that year, 2010, the Miami-Dade TPO undertook this study, and at that time, it quantified the supply and demand of truck parking in Miami-Dade County, right? And at that time, there was some number close to 12,000 spaces that would be needed in Miami-Dade County, 12,000 truck parking spaces. They put that in perspective in terms of land necessary to fill that kind of demand, and it came up to something along the lines of 1,100 acres of land needed to fill that kind of demand and so forth. So a couple of years later, the TPO in 2012 followed that initial study from 2010 with an implementation guideline. And that was the also known as Phase 2 study from the Miami-Dade TPO. And that was also titled Development of Truck Parking Facilities in Miami-Dade County, or Phase 2. And that study itself was an implementation, as I mentioned earlier. It outlined parcels for potential development and assessment. And one of the parcels that was outlined back in 2012 in that report was our Dolphin Truck Travel Center, or Dolphin Truck Parking Facility, right? That 35-acre site that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and just again refresh your memory, since we sold it to Miami-Dade County. So back in 2012, the Department of Transportation was directed in 2012 through that study to look at developing that very specific facility. Not only did we look at the department, as I have mentioned also before, we are an implementation agency, right? We follow the direction and the vision of the local transportation authority, planning transportation authority like the TPO. And we followed up and actually assessed that very specific site along with a site right next to it or a park and ride facility. I was involved in 2014, a couple of years later, on the planning assessment of that facility, not only for the park and ride facility, but also for the truck parking facility. As you may know, the truck parking facility did not go anywhere. It was met with, some obstacles and rejection from different areas, from development community, elected officials, and so forth. The park and ride facility was actually built and is out there right now as you see it, sitting empty.
Empty.
Right, correct. And so, it's now fast forward a few years later, and most recently, in 2019, we ended up selling that parcel that we were going to develop, that Dolphin parcel, about 34, 35 acres of land. We sold it to Miami-Dade County. Got a couple payments already from Miami-Dade County, and there's a couple additional payments still pending. Suffice it to say that, we have so far, by the way, we sold that parcel for $25.1 million to Miami-Dade County. Our core leadership here in District 6 has committed to replacing that parcel or that project or that truck parking facility in the Dolphin area. That very same parcel, 35 acres, we're looking to create another project to find a suitable site to replace that one. And we're going to use the proceeds of that sale to the county, $25 million in this totality, by the time we finish that installment agreement, towards a development or a truck parking facility somewhere else in Miami-Dade County. So that kind of leads me into this effort. And this effort is not only looking at finding a suitable site, and that's the engineering analysis part of the effort, and also I'm also going through the process of, once again, quantifying the supply and demand in Miami-Dade County. And that's also important for us to make the case for developing these types of facilities. Again, we keep quoting numbers dating back to 2010, 2012 in terms of, demand necessary and the kind of acreage that would be needed to supply that demand. So I'm taking that step as it is right now, and that effort is underway to quantify the supply and demand, and also to find a suitable replacement site. Now, I'm going to go real quick through the next slides in a few minutes. I don't want to bore you with the technical aspects of the analysis, but I want to point out up front is, in the past, we've done several analysis, and we have been for potential suitability for not only expanding, capacity of these types of facilities, but mainly we have been concentrating on government-owned land, FDOT-owned land, county-owned land. This effort is going to be a little bit different because we're actually looking to acquire land. The department is on board to acquire a parcel of land, provided it's suitable, provided it has the technical specifications that we require to be able to have a successful development project. So that's kind of what we're going out with this site feasibility. We're private land, it's on the table. Certainly we're gonna go through the review process of all the previous sites that we have analyzed, and we have addressed, we have identified, but we're looking for private land throughout the county. And obviously, we have our own criteria. We're actually modifying that criteria a little bit to talk a little bit, about those specific elements. It also includes, looking at parcels perhaps that are outside of the UDV. We're not taking that off the table. Next slide, please. So, just in terms of the overview, I'll tell you a little bit about objectives. We're going to kind of address, some of the process and schedule, because I have I'm in the crunch. I have other phases, so there are future phases of the project to move along. So this planning effort needs to be completed within a specific period of time. Okay. So let me, next slide, please. Slide number 13. I'll get into quickly, you know, some of the, you know, and I've already kind of spoken to some of the these items, but this kind of, this slide here summarizes on the feasibility or the site selection parcel that we're looking for. That we're looking at previous sites, we're incorporating private land into the fold now. You know, and we have this tiered analysis or this process where we start looking at different criteria. In the next few slides, we're going to kind of show you what we're looking for. And that's just to summarize the effort. We're going to come up with conceptual layouts. If we find a suitable site that is government-owned land or FDOT-owned land, you know, that's an easier process. If it's privately owned, you know, we're going to be looking to purchase that land. Next slide. And so forth. So these are some of the studies that we've you know, done in the past, and the one on the far right-hand side is the TPO Phase 2 study that I mentioned earlier in my opening statement. And that's the one that included, or the, I guess we can call it again, the implementation Phase 2 that outlines several parcels. Again, that's a 2012 effort, and the Dolphin parcel was outlined. It was actually selected as a potential viable site at that time. Those two other efforts on the far left-hand side, that is the planning assessment for that truck parking in the Dolphin area and the park and ride. And then we did some more recently in 2015, 16, we did some market analysis to see if we could actually look at, you know, not only developing the Golden Glades facility, which that one is certainly on track and will move forward. And certainly I'm going to be coming back to this committee to kind of update you on how that's going, but it's definitely going to move along and so forth. So next slide, please. And I'll get into the evaluation process. We do this preliminary screening process, and then we go through this analysis that includes some concepts, right? And just to kind of give you, next slide, please, just to give you an idea on the tiered analysis, now we're looking at proximity to certain freight generators. We're looking at proximity to major highway connection points. You know, so something around the airport, obviously, or is probably going to be, you know, at the very top of the list. We're looking at land use, right? We want to have the proper land use designation. I mentioned the freeway or limited access facility proximity, and we want to look at the surrounding area, right? One thing that is not necessarily outlined here in these slides is something that's very important, and I think you would all agree with me, which is aligning political support early on the process. Before we even start going through this process, I don't think I want to, we kind of learned our lessons, I should say, in the last few years, where yes, we may have an idea about what we want to accomplish, but you know, we need to go early in the process to elected officials. We need to look at the surrounding area. You know, we want to vet potential, or mitigate potential controversy issues from the general public early on. You know, and assure elected officials and the general public that these types of facilities are valuable and they're not going to interfere with their everyday operations, whether they're commercial or residential areas. For obvious reasons, you know, facilities like this and surrounded by residential communities are not, even if they have the proper land use designation for commercial development or industrial development, they may run into some problems. So my point here is mainly aligning that political support early on in the process. Next slide, please. The second tier, that's tier 2 analysis, starts looking a little bit more in detail on those sides. Potentials, and these are elements that we look at as fatal flaw. Do we have any potential obstacles early on that we can identify that may render this project unfeasible? And that's kind of the process. Permitting, other impacts, you know, that we may not be able to quantified early on. Maybe there's some issues with utilities. You know, these are the kinds of things, environmental elements. And then we start looking at constructability and some other issues like cost. Next slide, please. Tier 3 is, in Tier 3, that's when we start looking at some potential concepts. And I have at the very end of the far bottom a land acquisition potential if in fact we identify the parcel that is privately owned. And we have some ideas and some strategies to assemble potentially several smaller parcels to get to the size that we would render feasible in terms of development. 10 plus acres and maybe even a little less than 10 might still work. You know, we have some criteria elements that we've already designed, and we'll take a look at a lot of those elements. Next slide. So in terms of schedule, I'm looking to complete this next June. We're actually underway with preliminary screening right now on Tier 1. I'm certainly going to be coming back to the committee to kind of get your input. Now, I'll tell you one thing that for obvious reasons, I'm not going to be able to disclose very specifics on privately owned sites that we may be looking at. And that's because I don't think we want to create a panic or create a notion that the department is looking at an acquisition when in fact it may not be a final decision or may not be a suitable site. Nevertheless, we're going to look at those potential candidates. But we'll get some input from the committee. You know, you'll see some presentations perhaps in the next couple months or so that are a little bit general. But suffice it to say that I think I wanted to come back and let you know what we're working on in terms of truck parking, specifically something that I mentioned on several occasions in previous briefings to this committee in terms of truck parking, and that is that the department, the state, and the federal government, I might add, because we do have some federal funding in place in the future to develop some of these facilities, is that we're committed to replacing that Dolphin truck parking facility that was essentially eliminated. And that's one of the measures. The other, the next slides are going to describe the our coordination with the trade industry. We're looking at private developers, the usual suspects that we normally coordinate with and we talk to county and our own TPO friends and partners. And certainly this committee, of course, and we'll continue that coordination and that discussion to hear your thoughts, to hear your perspective, and to gather some input. Certainly, we have an idea on the development path for these types of facilities. We have support locally at the state level for acquisition of property to develop this, and that's mainly, one of the key elements, again, that I wanted to point out. We are going to be acquiring land if we happen to identify, whether it's a county-owned parcel or privately owned parcel, even if it's county-owned, that may entail as well an acquisition component, maybe a little bit easier. We'll wait and see. The next few slides describe the, the supply and demand analysis, and again, I kind of talked about this, and I'm not going to spend too much time discussing these items, but it is important for the department to make its case, right, in terms of the development of these types of facilities. We all know that they're critical, they're complementary assets to the logistics system, much in the same manner as I talk about parking lot facilities. In the past when I was talking about transit, right? They're complementary assets to the whole system, to the bus system, rail system, interbus city and so forth. Well, truck parking facilities are also important. And again, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here with these items. But next slide, please. The supply and demand, we're going to be talking to, certainly our stakeholders to get a better handle on the supply in the county. I will point out that the state of Florida, our Tallahassee central office had a statewide effort that had an attempt at quantifying supply and demand, and they did obviously at the state level. And one of the things that they omitted from that study, I know some of the members of this committee that participated and are part of the Florida Freight Advisory Committee kind of heard this. I know Stanley, you've heard about that, and so has John. One of our I guess our, complaints, so to speak, and our concerns down here in South Florida. And that is that the local driver perspective was not captured in that statewide effort. So the supply and demand utilization is a little off, to say the least. So this effort is going to go back and it's going to take a look at that effort, and it's going to work independently to really, look at, the Miami-Dade County area. What is the supply? What is the actual demand? That's what we're hoping to accomplish with this effort. And this is going to bolster our case in South Florida for these types of demos. I've said it before. I make the business case with these, with these types of studies, with these documents. They lead to projects, but they also lead to funding, and that's one critical element. Next slide, please. It's just a summary of some of the major tasks. We're reviewing the methodology that was used in the past for quantifying the supply and demand. We're going to look at the entire county, certain facilities. We know we have those sanctioned, what I call sanctioned, unsanctioned truck parking facilities out west of US 27 in the northwest quadrant of the turnpike in US 27. We're going to take a look at that whole area and several pockets throughout the county to get a better handle. Next slide, please. And again, it's part of the process also, as I mentioned, is looking at previous efforts, previous studies. We're looking at the methodologies used on federal supply and demand studies, other states. So that's all on the table to get a better handle on our effort to really truly get to the bottom of what is it really required in Miami-Dade County? How much truck parking do we need? We have anecdotal evidence, and we've seen it. We have a better understanding. I think John will agree with the fact that if you just look at the commercial industrial development projects that are coming online, that generates a massive amount of need for truck parking facilities. Right? That's and some of those industrial developments really are not designed to handle truck parking. It's a temporary saving operation and so forth, not necessarily what we're looking at. So next slide, please. These are, again, I'm going to be coming back to the committee to get a little bit of help specifically on the supply and demand. Since we have some surveys, we want to get a little bit of perspective and comments from your end in terms of, asking the right questions to several stakeholders that we have identified. Next slide, please. Again, this is, we'll take a look at next steps in terms of future phases. And one thing that I will add onto this presentation is that, next slide, please. We're also looking at, data elements associated with our supply and demand analysis. We're looking at GPA's data vendors. We are going to be purchasing a specific data sets to give us an idea where trucks are located, where they're parking, where they're staging, and so forth. And that'll give us a data point to correlate with utilization activities and also supply and demand for those types of facilities that we're looking at. And that's pretty much it in terms of the presentation. I got next slide. That's just, again, this one might take me a little longer to complete. These are two parallel efforts, the engineering or feasibility site analysis for replacing the Dolphin site and this supply and demand. So what we're talking about here are two closely related efforts that are following very similar tracks in terms of schedule, finishing this up by June, July of next year. One, again, the one that I described the most earlier, is finding a potential replacement site for the Dolphin. That will be the outcome. We'll take it to our project development process. And then this supply and demand analysis effort, to make our case and really get a handle on really what's happening at the local level and having some updated information, updated data. Next slide, and I have, I did not ask my consultants to attend this meeting, but we got two separate consultant resources working on these efforts. They have the contact information, but I'm the lead, and this is a topic that I normally take a center stage since I've been working on it, and it's kind of my my pet project. And but again, if you have any questions, I'll open it up to the committee for any comments, any suggestions.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Very informative. We appreciate it. We've been down this road before. I just want to go on record for those that are new to the committee. We've been working on truck parking probably since the inception of the FTAC back in 2004. And those that have been involved from day one, how this dolphin parking thing came about and how it was lost was more of a surprise than anything else, because it was something that had been reported to the county commissioners on a monthly basis over a process of probably 10, 12 years. So it was a surprise to us when all of a sudden one of our county commissioners, I'll go without saying the name, actually questioned who FTAC was. So it was a little concerning that it just goes to show you that a lot of these county commissioners are not, and I know we're on record, but are not taking the time to actually read the committees and the volunteers that are actually working to improve Dade County streets in order to improve commerce through the streets, especially on the committee. So I just want to go on record on that. So Carlos, to you, my question is, are all the prior sites that we had visited and we had discussed and had a potential of, are those going to be back on this report? Are we going to be reviewing those again? Are those going to be options? Are we looking at completely different sites in order to stay out of the commissioners' districts that are not as lending their ear as to not in my backyard? So that's one. And where, how do I phrase this? On, is that being considered at any point in time, if we put this back in front of the commissioners and we do all the legwork once again, is there a possibility at any point in time that we're going to be adding a park and ride to this project?
Yeah, so I'll answer the initial question. The second one is a little harder. So that'll give me a little bit of time to formulate a politically correct. No, I'll be as honest as I can, Yeah. Look, the previous sites that we have analyzed, that we have looked at, are back on the table. Certainly we're reviewing, we're going to look at, things change. We have been looking at sites since, 4 or 5 years ago. The area may have changed. We're looking at, that's part of the effort on the feasibility and site selection analysis. We're starting with the work that we have done in the past, and that's review process. So we're screening those once again. We're applying the same metrics, and not only the same, I wouldn't say the same metrics, we're applying our criteria, our modified criteria. As I mentioned earlier, just because we have sites that are outside of the UDB, if they're within range of the UDB and we're creating a buffer to see if we can cast a net of potential development outside of the UDB, with some exceptions, of course, those may be on the table, and we have now analyzed some sites, outside of the UDB in the past, which we kind of discarded and we removed, and they were essentially, eliminated from further analysis, and that was back then because we didn't think that, it might have been viable, but that has changed, since we may be able to develop certain facilities outside of the UDB, provided we have some exemptions, and we might be able to work something out. That's one thing. So I guess in general terms, the answer is a most resounding yes. The previous sites are on the table, and remember that we're adding another wrinkle to the equation here. Now we have a lot more possibilities because we're looking at privately owned land. That opens the door, and as John has suggested in the past, look, just looking at single sites for a specific amount may not be so effective. We may have to look at assembling 2 or 3 parcels to arrive at the our preferred size. Okay, so that is the task at hand in terms of finding a suitable site. Now, I do not believe right now that a park and ride facility may come into play at a site that we may select, right? And you know, things can always change, but keep in mind the criteria for a truck parking facility differs greatly to a park and ride facility. You know, and there's, you know, other parameters. And yes, there's always a possibility for things and plans to change from the department. But as it is right now, I would remind you that, you know, we have a funding pot or seed money or capital startup money, so to speak, to develop this facility. And that is the proceeds from the sale of that parcel to Miami-Dade County to the tune of $25.2 million. Okay. So,
But only a portion of that. But only a portion of that is actually allocated. Isn't it the 14 million that's been allocated to do the truck parking, or all the 25 million?
So we have that is part of the entire pot of money. That's $25.12 million. That's the full sale price to the county. We intend to use the entire money, the entire pot of money, and we may need, and we're going to need more. That's why I mentioned earlier. You know, look, we may spend $25 million in costs of acquisition, land acquisition alone, right? We don't know that yet. We're going to take a look at that. That's going to be part of the process. But I'm also lining up federal funding to continue with that project as it is right now with future phases, right? You know, if I'm able to purchase a parcel for, let's say, $15-20 million, right? We may have a little bit more money left to continue with the other phases, but that only takes you so far. We need other, you know, we need a design phase, you know, obviously prior to that, I need a PD&E phase, I need a design phase. Yeah, it's a lengthy process, but we're lining, as you may be aware, we started lining up our future phases. We're also lining up funding, and the federal funding is in place. Truck parking is a priority for the state, for the Freight Mobility and Trade Plan. And I'll give you another example of the commitment that the state has in terms of truck parking. The Golden Glaze facility that is going to be coming online is essentially funded with federal funds, all federal funds. The design, owner's rep, design build process, and construction dollars are in place, and they're all federal, all right? And that's you know, because there's a need, and it's a priority because it's a priority for the state. It's clearly outlined in our what we call our Freight Mobility and Trade Plan. I guess our plan for the for freight from the state of Florida. So those types of projects, you know, are going to and will be funded with potentially federal dollars besides the monies that we're able to contribute. So, and again, this project, you know, that future site, it's even easier to make a case on our end because it's almost, you know, we're applying some local resources, right? And normally, if you're looking to partner, even, you know, with counties or and even with your agency, you can make the case and show that you're providing, you're adding some of your own money or some of your local money to the mix, and the rest of the money can be allocated through federal funds. So,
Carlos, I'm sorry, quick question. You're throwing some numbers out there, like $15-20 million for a parcel. How big is this enterprise? And the reason why I'm asking is because I just put in a CapEx for my company, and we're adding 2.5 acres of parking, and that's, you know, buying the land. It's in Homestead. Oh, not even Homestead. It's next to where I am in the Redlands area. So I know it's not Medley, but still it's in the Redlands. So we're buying the land, 2.5 acres. We're doing the whole construction, the whole, you know, paving, fence, lights, gates, the whole deal. 2.5 acres. And that's only 2.5 acres. It's not, you know, the size you're talking about, but it's costing me less than $250,000. So I don't understand these numbers of $15 million. Are we putting like some kind of like truck wash or something some like a hotel?
Right. No, and look, I'll tell you one thing. John, I think John is going to chime in here, but keep in mind that we have, aside from the cost of land, we have additional costs within our end, and that includes a project development environmental phase. I need to go through that phase. I need to come up with a set of plans. So there are several costs associated, and to be a little bit more clear in my answer, we're looking to develop a full-blown travel center with multiple amenities, because that's what's going to draw the potential private sector partner to operate and maintain. It is not going to be designed, and the project is not envisioned.
But that if they're going to be operating, let them pay for it. They're going to make a profit. Let them pay for the for that, and just, you know what I mean? Like, why are we flipping? I don't get. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm too business minded and not enough into government, but I'm blown away by these numbers.
Right. So they'll get confused with the amount of money. It's, as I mentioned, $25.1 million, the total amount of money that we got from the sale of the parcel, the Dolphin parcel that we sold to the county. That money is intended to be used towards truck parking. I wouldn't tell you right now. I couldn't give you a figure of what is it going to cost me to develop a specific site, because I have not identified a site. But I'll tell you one thing: homestead costs are one thing. We're looking to develop a full-blown facility, more than likely in an area north of 836. Cost of land is a lot higher there. I think John would be, would agree with me with that statement. So just to give you an idea, I couldn't tell you right now. We're starting the process right now to find out where could we find a parcel that's suitable, that has all the bells and whistles, that has the proper metrics for us to attract a private partner. We're going to put up money. We're going to put up land. What we need is, and this, by the way, this is following it would follow the same approach that we're following with the Golden Glaze facility. All right, that's about 17 acres. We have money for construction. We have money in terms of owning the land. And all we need is a private developer, a private partner to operate and maintain it at a profit. That's the idea. And it would also be a full-blown facility. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to not only expand, maximize the number of truck parking spaces, but also we're looking, to make it, flexible enough that the private sector can generate enough of a profit to partner with the department. And I'm comfortable saying that I think it's going to be successful because, think about it. In terms of business mind, right? If I were to tell you as a business, I have $25 million, what can you get me with $25 million in terms of truck parking? I tell you, my criteria is very simple. I need to maximize the number of truck parking spaces. I need certain amenities or minimum site criteria. I tell you, I need about 10 acres. I also need some security. And I'm going to list certain of the aspects of the facility itself to be developed and designed by you, the business community, so that it's flexible for you to operate and maintain it. You're going to pay me a ground lease for 30 years at a fixed amount and generate your revenue stream with whatever amenities you want to place in that facility. Do you want a fueling station, fueling operations? Go ahead. We may require certain, as I said, certain amenities, and that remains to be defined. But again, I think to answer your question, these are numbers that I mentioned, it's our working capital towards truck parking. Let me just put it that way. I don't know what the cost would be to acquire a parcel that I have not been able to identify within Miami-Dade County, whether it be county-owned, a federal owned, or even privately owned. It all depends. One thing is, again, cost of land varies. The parcel that we sold to the county for $25.12 million, what we normally refer to as parcel 3705 internally, also known as the Dolphin facility, Dolphin Truck Travel Center, that was killed, that was eliminated a few years ago. That parcel in that area, if you look at the cost of land, it's roughly $1 million an acre.
Yeah, at minimum.
Minimum, right? And that's, we got to, and I spoke about this in the past, that we got to the point where that parcel was was actually put out for a public bid. We had 6 to 8 sealed bids that were not open because the department decided to sell to.
That's where the parking lot is now?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's where the park and ride is now?
In that area, general vicinity, right next to it. Yeah. It's about 34 acres or so. We sold it to the county. The county has some plans for some transit-oriented development. I'm not sure what their plan is, but they have a transportation-related project associated with that parcel, and that's why we're able to sell it. That's how we normally conduct business. But really, I hope I've answered your questions. You're going to be hearing more about this, and this is going to be a lot more clear when I start talking about the Golden Glades facility, how we envision, proceeding with the project. But again, I'm going to point something out. We're a transportation agency. We're getting in the business of truck parking facilities because the private sector have not been able to really meet the demand that is required for truck parking, right? And one of the major issues is cost of land. Is it feasible? You guys can do it out in Homestead. There's a little bit different dynamic in that part of the county. But at the same time, I don't know if you're going to have the same amenities that we're envisioning ourselves.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add in here, Willie, first of all, thank you for your input yesterday when we asked you about the Homestead area.
Mm-hmm.
The difficulty with this is the magnitude of 10 to 1. The difference between the prices when you get south of the real urban infill area, just south of Kendall Drive, et cetera, Killian Parkway, you're at 1/10 of the price of the areas north. As soon as you get into the area where development is restricted to either one house per 5 acres or one house per 10 acres, like it is down in the Redland and Homestead area, you really have restricted the number of people that can use it for various things. The trouble is, as soon as they hear that a government entity is interested in it, the prices go up. The big advantage of government to government is that if it's a state-owned facility, a county-owned facility, or a federal facility, they're not going to raise the price when they hear the DOT is interested. Unfortunately, when they hear the DOT is interested anywhere else, the price goes up dramatically. The difficulty we have, though, is that north of 836 requirement. Almost, I think I mentioned this once more, but I'll do it very quickly. 90% of all the industrial property in Miami-Dade County is north of State Road 836, literally, on the north side of State Road 86. 10% that's left on the south side of State Road 86, going all the way down to the Monroe County line, 90% of that is north of Quail Roost Drive. That's fairly stunning statistics when you look at it. So what it means is everybody is fighting for that 90% area where all the truckers are right now running. We need to serve the farming interests in South Dade, and we're definitely going to be able to do that. The good part is we can do it at a lesser price. When we start trying to serve the supply chain and distribution interests for dry goods and non-perishables, just items to stock the retail stores, that gets to be really expensive and competitive, because every real estate investment trust, not only in the United States, but in the world, from Prologis to IDI to Goodman, all of them have all stepped in and they're fighting over these few acres that are left. So maybe that kind of explains it as short as I can.
Green Max, yeah.
And let me add another point in terms of what I describe as our working capital or our seed money for truck parking. Look, bottom line is, you may be aware now that following our traditional project development process to deliver these types of facilities is lengthy, is riddled with obstacles that may come up at the very end of the process when you're almost ready to begin a serious design phase leading to construction. And I think the Dolphin facility is a perfect example. We worked on PD&Es, we're getting ready for a public hearing and move on to the design phase. And then, we ran into, some obstacles. But another way of solving the truck parking problem is looking at reversing that process. And we talked about that. Some of the working capital, seed money that I described, may be used perhaps towards a grant to expand existing facilities. Right, I have to go through that process publicly and make it competitive and open to the public. But we may very well say, look, I got X amount of dollars, and we put what's called a request for qualifications or request for information, and say, look, we have X amount of dollars. Can you expand your existing facilities, or do you have land that you own and you're able to, develop, some form of truck parking facility? It may not even have to be a full-blown truck travel center. Surface parking at a capacity is still on the table. So your type of project really certainly would be on the table and would be something that would be interesting. And that's one way to kind of put it, all right? And reversing the process through grants, and that's another way. Or taking our approach with the general process we follow to deliver projects like we are, but limit the scope of the project. We don't have to build, the 15, 20 acre truck parking facility. We talked about this in the past as well, right? Which is, piecemeal it and have certain strategic areas throughout the county, especially north of 836, with some surface parking, not necessarily full amenities, a fueling station or any other things, just to alleviate the problem. We're encountering that issue and in several areas and around the Golden Glades, even US 27 and then Metley, Miami Gardens, Hialeah area, and so forth. So that's one way to put it, and there may be additional funding coming to our district in terms of, and I mean federal funds for future development opportunities.
But Carlos, just to go on record and really, because since you were new to the committee, I just want to go on record. The truck parking is not just for long hauls or tandem trucking. We're also doing long-term parking for rentals for local drivers to give them a facility to also be able to park their trucks, because since a lot of the zoning in Miami-Dade County has been structured to eliminate commercial vehicles in private properties or to be parked, especially rigs, and just have them stop parking in Walmarts and in the gas stations, which they're getting ticketed. So that's another component that we were adding to the truck parking, is a long-term parking for those truckers, owner operators that are local, that have a place to be able to park their rigs in a secured environment. So that was another reason. That's another component to the truck parking. So it's unfortunately the only reason why I want to make sure that we emphasize regarding park and ride is that even though they're completely different operations, Carlos, and we understand, but exactly what happened last time was that it was the two parcels of land were only separated by maybe 2 or 3 acres or 10 acres between the two. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't have those papers in front of me. A very small amount of acreage between the two entities. We lost the truck parking because of that park and ride. And it's been sitting, and I'm going to go on the record, it's been sitting empty, unused for what, 4 years now? So, and that's the reason why I want to emphasize the importance. I'm sorry, I have to take this really urgent call. I'm going to have to put you guys on mute because I'm so sorry. Give me just 1 minute. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, John.
I'm going to add a comment in terms of what the chairwoman expressed, and that is, again, the local driver perspective. We're accounting for that even in our efforts to align political support. That's the local constituency that they're serving in terms of elected official representation. So that's another argument that we're making once we start.
My only concern is that, and again, this is very high level, so I don't have all the details yet, but if you're paying $1 million per acre, then you have to develop it and plan it and do all that stuff. The cost, to me, is going to be prohibitive for these local guys that are usually parking off of behind the golf place there, the new golf place, they're parking in gravel areas because they're paying $20 a week to Fulano that has a yard back there, right? They can't afford. I mean, it's a nice thought, but they're not able to afford to pay a place that's $1 million an acre. And that's just my opinion. I mean, I think we're building something that's like for a Ferrari when guys are driving Chevys. You know what I mean? For long-term parking. The guys that go there and shower and are gonna fill up their gas and pay $15 for a shower. And stuff, yeah, those guys are doing because it's a one-time deal and then they go and drive for 2-3 days. But anyway, that's my thought.
Right. But we keep in mind the ideas when working with the private partnerships on this type of project was the consensus was to have a monthly rate of somewhere between $200 to $300 to be able to have a secure parking spot for that truck on a monthly rate to they rent out that slot, which is kind of like what the common pricing is. Especially in Doral, there's a few places that charge a little bit more than that and they're unsecured and they've actually been broken into already, the trucks. So the idea is to keep a reasonable amount of pricing down so that these local drivers can actually utilize it. And yeah, I mean, it's been a hard sale because it's better and best use of the land and how can we maximize the revenue and return on investment. We got to look at it at a bigger picture. We got to kind of look at it as saying we're not just trying to build a facility. We're trying to improve an industry. And actually, the industry right now is in desperate need in order to continue. With the COVID, it just shows that the trade community has been vital to keeping a lot of this product and a lot of these PPEs moving, and it just shows that the commerce needs the trucks, and we need to show them that these are vital components. So yeah, it may not be in some people's minds the best and better use of a land, but when you're improving the whole aspect of an industry, because when you listen to the drivers that are coming down that have your comments, truckers don't want to come to Miami. I mean, if you heard otherwise, and talk to the long haul carriers, they're the first ones they'll tell you that they'll actually convert their clients to, hey, why don't you ship it here or we'll consolidate it. So they don't want to come because exactly that, they don't have any places. So the idea is just looking at it. Yeah. It's just looking at it as the opportunity to really make Miami, the area, wherever it's area, to actually have that component where a cargo hub location, one of our biggest airports, one of the largest importers, perishable goods. We want to be able to have the facilities to service the industry. And right now, it's sad to say, but Miami is, with all the volumes and all the airport and all the Port Miami, MIA, with all the volumes of flights and sailings, we really, really, really have put the trucking community and the truckers and the overland process part of the bottom of the totem pole. And now it's biting us in our where. So I think it's time that we really need to focus and really get something that they can come back and say, oh, wow, now they're serious about the overland. Because if we're, my only concern is I don't want to go down the road again and 2 months out before we get ready to break ground, we kind of have it pulled the rug from under us. I just want to make sure that whatever due diligence we need to do prior, even though it's all on record with every committee meeting that we've done and presented to every committee commissioner, that we make it a point that they understand the importance and interest. And I think it's a little bit more behooves us as a committee that we need to really push our county commissioners to understand this is not about your district. This is about an industry that represents hundreds of thousands of jobs in the county. And that's what we need to understand it. This is not about their residential communities. This is not about their districts. This is about an industry that really affects the South Florida community farther reach than what their district is. And I think that's where the realization is. I know this story is going to come. We're going to have to change this a lot because we have 7 county commissioners going for election in Dade County now. Out of the 13, I think 7 of them are going in for elections or re-elections. So, you know, we gotta
An
make sure
opportunity
that,
for education.
Yeah, yes, it is. And one of the good things is Carlos is working on finding out where so many of the local drivers are actually living, because most of them are constituents of one of those 13 commissioners.
Mhm.
So this is not only a real need for industry, for our ability to get during COVID, post-COVID, et cetera, goods delivered to our homes. It's the employment of our of their constituents.
so,
You
yeah.
know,
I guess I'm going to make one final point, if I may. Oh, I'm sorry, Stanley, I think you wanted to.
No, I was just gonna ask Barbie, is part of that reluctance to come down here the fact that they're going back empty?
Yeah.
It's that, and it's also the, you know, if you talk to some of the, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity, but if you talk to somebody that they're treated, and pardon my French, gentlemen, and I know we're being recorded, so I'm going to try to be as best. They're treated like le caca. Okay,
Yeah.
they're not being, they're treated like undesirables. They're treated like if they're hoodlums, that they attract bad stuff, that wherever a trucker is going to be, there's going to be drugs and drinking and women. I mean, do you not know the requirements of DOT that stops a driver that could be under the influence? He's not only losing his job, he's losing a lot more than people have at risk. And I'm not saying it's not, but you know, that stereotyping, which, you know, is so common, that we need to kind of really understand. And aside from the fact, yeah, we're dead haul, but they can always pick up something. But when you have some place to be able to wait for an order, let's say I can pick up, maybe not today, but I can pick up an order tomorrow, and you have some place to actually wait to have that order and to be able to back up into a container, into a truck, into a company's yard. If he has no place to park to wait for an order for 2 days, he's not going to stick around because he can't afford the tickets. So it's a, you know,
Juggling act.
it may be, yeah, we're dead haul state. It's more expensive. He's already, you know, the thing is that regardless, however we want to look at it, we're a dead haul state. They're already charging their outbound loads when they're coming down. It's already factored into their cost. So they're not really technically losing, the company's not technically losing money because they're already hike it up when they're coming down here, because exactly that. But the fact of the matter, if the driver has no place to stay or to wait, to park a truck, to wait for an order for 1 or 2 days, so he doesn't go back dead haul, that's the problem. And we don't have that. We don't have to offer that here. And unfortunately, a lot of companies, you know, that have empty parking lots, first minute they see a trucker, the first thing they do is call the police, get him out of here. So, you know, the guy is constantly on the road trying to find a place to rest, and which eats into his hours of operations. And, you know, there's a lot of little things that go with it. So it's giving them a place. Okay, I may not have an order today, but they told me tomorrow an order will be ready. I have where I can sit and I can, you know, park without a problem. We don't have that here. So, you know, that's just that's one of the reasons, you know,
But
that you add to that.
Yeah, and I would just say, you know, when I talk to all of the major trucking companies, particularly the big ones, Carlos, you know, they're seeing, and they will continue to see a hike in online ordering, and so the volume is just going to continue to grow, you know. Yep. And so, you know, we should not be in any illusion that because we're in this pandemic that things are going to slow down. They're not. It's actually going to grow. So we do have to figure this out. I'd be interested to hear from Willie. Willie, how do you handle your groups of truckers that have to come down there and stay overnight? What kind of welcoming or, you know?
Well, we take it, well, not in COVID. So the last spring doesn't qualify because we had a shutdown, but we have a driver's lounge, which has sleeping rooms. I mean, I don't know if I give you guys a tour of that, but it has showers, private rooms, an office area where you can, you know, get on your laptop and Wi-Fi and the whole deal. You can look for loads or send your invoices, whatever it is. Recliner chairs with games, TV, you know, Game Boy, whatever they call it. I'm not a gamer, so whatever the thing is, they play. So yeah, it gives that. And we have currently a 3-acre parking lot, which hosts 120 trucks with single filed. In the spring, we can fit as many as 160 in there. And then we're actually in the process. I just put a CapEx in to get another 2.5 acres, which should be approved next week, the 22nd, and be ready in about 3 months. Just about a 90-day process to get all that done. We already have the land picked out about 5 blocks away from our location to have another 120 more trucks to come in and park. So we're flipping the bill ourselves because this is needed. And that's the only reason why I brought up the question about the funds, because I'm doing it, now mind you, I'm doing it in the Redlands, but I'm doing it a lot more economically and quickly. 3 months, boom, done, and so that's what I'm looking at. Maybe we need to look at locations that are more friendly to, as John said, we can see where these drivers live, where are they domiciled, where were they making benefits. I'm sure most of these drivers are not living in Doral, right? Because I don't think they can afford to live in Doral. Right? Exactly. So they're living in certain areas, possibly the southwest area, right? So places like that might be more beneficial for truck parking. They can have it close to their house, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe we're putting the cart in front of the horse by looking for a place that's $1 million an acre when we can find a place that's $100,000 an acre and get it done much faster. That's my point on that.
Right. But we also have to keep in mind, sorry for jumping in real quick, Sandy, but we also have to keep in mind those long haul carriers, that extra 5, 10, 15 miles to move it down south is going to be a deterrent for them because it's too far out of their route to be able to go ahead and do that. For long-term parking, I totally agree. Probably majority of them live down south in the southwest areas, in that area, or even up north, Hialeah, you're in those areas. I granted. But in order for the long haul carriers, they want to be close to where the actual delivery areas are going to be, your cargo hub centers, your Doral, your Medley. Maybe it's not Doral, maybe it might be Medley. Hopefully it could be a little bit further to the south. I'm not saying I'm not saying Doral. I mean, because I know it's very expensive. The land has become like extremely, it's like gold now, but I think that anything that we can have like a happy medium that's flexible for both, that's whether clear, easy access to the roads, easy access to their highways is going to be that quickest route to them. But we have to keep in mind on that long haul, because if it's too far out of their route, they're not going to use it because it's
well, like Carlos said, we can piecemeal instead of having this huge 30-acre location in one place. Do 5 acres at a time and do like a little hub and spokes, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the reasons I bring this up is because I think every time we meet, we talk about the truck parking space, and I feel that we fail to talk about the driver, right? And what I mean by that is, in your presentation, there should be, a few slides that the consideration is the driver, right? So in other words, you're building slides that incorporates the needs of the driver and all of the circumstances or all of the important things that are required for that environment that we just talked about, right? Because I think the focus, and it should be obviously on the location, but I think that it's also important that we look at the driver component of all of this, and you build out slides about the driver needs, the driver challenges, the driver, so that you're looking at it holistically, because I think that's going to sell well for whoever and wherever, and it'll get commissioners and others to kind of think about the human factor, right? Because it's not just the cost factor, but it's the human factor, and then of course the cargo factor. I mean, for me, it's all about the cargo. I'm with Barbie on that space, but I do think there's value in talking a little bit about the driver, and it's not any one driver. It's just the situation for the drivers and how that kind of ties into all of this, because you're selling a package. Or you're trying to convince or persuade a package and not just the space.
Stimulus talks. We have President Trump tweeting about it once.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but just something.
Stanley, that makes perfect sense. Great comments in terms of presenting a message that includes a concise message that includes the driver perspective, and we can certainly do a better job. That's going to come in handy, like you said. At the time that we start making a case, we start, aligning political support, community support, right? You need to provide that perspective. Otherwise, it's going to be too abstract for people to understand, right? Trucks or supply chain logistics, we may get it ourselves, right? Since we're a little bit more specialized, we understand the business a lot better than the general folks. But most definitely, really made some great comments in terms of affordability, you know, for the local driver. And I was taking a few notes since I've kind of heard that before, but it never hit me until now, since I'm hearing those kinds of concerns. But I will remind you one thing that, and we're going to be accounting for these elements as we move forward, all these projects, especially with the Golden Glaze facility. Keep in mind that in a way, if you look at this, the department is stepping in to subsidize truck parking. That's what this is about. We're putting up money, we're putting up land, right? And the only thing we want in return is we want to maximize truck parking spaces for the drivers. You know, we want similar welcoming facilities like the ones that Willie described at his own shop, right? We want something similar to that. And that's what we're looking at. So in terms of the project itself and moving forward, we're going to have a say as an agency, as a department, as the agency that's putting up the funds, that's putting up the land. We're going to have a say. And I'm not saying in any way that we're be including any type of language to restrict you know, pricing levels, but you know what? We may have to look at that element to make it affordable. We're subsidizing the cost of land. We're subsidizing the cost of capital improvements up front. I mean, you know, I've said it before, and I'll go on record once again. Some of these projects, at least the Golden Glaze facility, without the construction dollars in place, the land alone, we have a feasible project. We have takers, private sector partners that are willing to develop a facility if we put $0 in capital contribution for construction. Right? And that's a good thing. Now we're making it a lot easier. When you're making it a lot easier, you'll have a little bit more flexibility, a wiggle room to negotiate a better deal for the drivers, right? For those amenities, those elements that may be welcoming. And yeah, we don't want to leave out the local, the short haul driver, you know, that we're talking about here. We don't want to cut them out of the opportunity. So we'll take that into consideration. Some great comments that I heard, you know, from the entire committee today. Willie, again, you know, great points on affordability. I'm not going to lose sight of that. We're going to take that into account. And Stanley, certainly the driver perspective, again, that's key here. To be able to make a case, to make it easier to sell this stuff, because at the end of the day, we got to make a case.
The selling point.
We got to go to elected officials, and we got to put a face to this, and not only some type of commercial facility for trucks, right? We got to give it the human element, the human touch, and I think the driver perspective is.
To add a little more to the human touch, also you might want to maybe look into a lot of the carriers now are really targeting to hire women. There's a huge driver shortage in the 6 figures, you know, and they're really going after the women to become drivers. And so having a safe place for women to park overnight might be a good selling point as well. You know, I mean, these are women that are by themselves in trucks, and parking on the side of the road somewhere might not be the safest place, you know? So,
That's a great point, Willie. Wow.
No, we had discussed several options, because when we were blindsided by the Dolphin, we actually started looking at the various smaller units to be able to see how we can like put little pockets throughout. And that's where we ran into, I love the idea. Yes, we need it, but not in my backyard. So I think that's where we need to come in with those little pockets of parking spots and trucks. And it's true, maybe what we can do is separate the long-term parking for the local guys in one separate area. It has nothing to do with, you know, maybe we have 3 or 4 of those located scatteredly, and then we maybe have one for long haul, like a full service truck stop that actually is the amenities and keeping those away. I mean, anything I'm for anything that's going to improve the conditions for the drivers and to move freight more freely and easily on the items like that. So I know we've probably talked this topic to death, because, you know, it's dear and close to all of our hearts that are on the committee. But just for the sake of time, because we're running at 3:16, we want to be able to have more comments regarding the next presentation from Carlos. regarding the next item, which is the FDOT truck community concerns for Port Miami. I gotta hear this. Wait times at the cargo terminal.
It's your fault, Barbara.
I'm ready.
This is all you're doing.
No, but Barbie, I was just letting you all, drive the truck. You were on a roll there. So
Yeah.
now we're gonna drive the truck to the Port Miami. All right, there we go.
And by the way, Madam Chair and members of the committee, I try very hard to make this as cryptic as possible so I wouldn't give it up. No, listen, this is what a perfect segue in talking about, I guess, the driver perspective. And let me give you a little bit of background information here. As you may be aware nowadays, given the pandemic, to no surprise to anyone, the trucking community is earning and getting the respect that it hasn't gotten for quite some time. They're actually elected officials, state officials, and the general community is kind of understanding nowadays the trucking community is delivering critical goods to market. Right now, people are sort of putting it together. Again, I'm preaching to the choir here, right? We know exactly how this works. We understand the dynamics. But now, the state, Tallahassee, the governor, lieutenant governor, and our own state secretary in Tallahassee is taking a keen interest into trucking issues. They're very interested, and they're actually reaching out to the local district offices, and I have been handed a very difficult assignment again, which is to look at the issues in Port Miami at the cargo terminals. And very difficult for the state to step in to come up with a solution. And I figure I put this up on the agenda just to hear your thoughts in general. We understand as a whole, right, in this committee, how the ports operate, right, the landlord ports. We've talked about this in the past. We, DOT, do not have necessarily jurisdiction within the ports. You have the terminal operators in Port Miami, like Palm Top, Seaboard Marine, which, operates, a lot different than the other operators. So we kind of know those issues, those details. But Tallahassee and the governor have been fielding several complaints on those choke points on the cargo operation, terminal operating gates at Port Miami. And by the way, that's also, they're fielding the same complaints in Port Everglades as well. The general complaints are the same, and yes, Madam Chair, we heard the phrase, there's no congestion at Port Miami, and that's accurate, right? Well, somewhat, if you provide a little bit more context. And we are aware of several initiatives at Port Miami with, those some projects where there's automated cargo terminal gate. There's some software upgrades for, with the terminal operators that are coming online, and those are not going to bear fruition. They're not going to, we're not going to be able to see the benefits of those projects until later on. Nevertheless, as I said earlier, our core leadership in Tallahassee is asking us, look, take a look at the issue. How can you work with the port, with the county, with your stakeholders, with your local committees to generate some ideas and some thoughts to generate potential solutions or points to improve those issues at the port. So it's simply a topic of discussion. I don't have any visuals to show you. Yes, I have, I didn't want to bore you with a bunch of pictures to show along lines of the port, right? You've seen those, you know exactly what that's like. But given what you know on the operations of the port, what are your thoughts? I'm open to, potential pilot projects. One thing we can do very well here was we can subsidize stuff. We love pilot projects, right? At the state, and that's something that, and again, I don't want it to be simply simple, let's throw money at it, right? It's simply, in a way, building coalition. I have not spoken to Port Miami. I briefly, we kind of had this conversation in the past 3 or 4 months. But I figure I kind of bring it up to your attention to kind of hear your thoughts and hear from you. I want to.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and open. Ooh. Hello. Wow, that was a lot of feedback. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll go ahead and start. As you know, in my prior role at FCBF, we work very closely with all the local truckers, drayage movers, and the terminal operators and the ports. And you know, first I want to go on a record and state it's not Port Miami, it's terminals. We have to separate the two entities. The port is not the congestion; it's the terminals. And unfortunately, it's the same in Port Everglades as it is in Port Miami. It's the terminal operators there. It's their separate operations. And the Port Miami, unfortunately, as a tenant port, does not have any authorization to go above and tell a company that's a landlord or it's a tenant on their port how to operate their business. Okay, so the one thing, and I can tell you that across the board of my 40 years in industry, the only thing that's going to resolve this problem is an appointment system. It's probably the only one thing that with the terminal operators to do a scheduled appointment system. And an appointment system is not like saying, oh, you have to go in there and you have a 12 o'clock appointment. If you're not there at 12, you lose it. No, it's a window of between 12 and 2 is your appointment and you have this time. So that type of structure will actually help, reduce waiting times. I'm not going to say eliminate them, but it'll help reduce them dramatically in the terminal operations. Unfortunately, within some of these terminal operations is just the simple fact that they don't have enough land in order to move their operation around to service the accounts quickly. You have, and if we're talking Port Miami here, let's go to South Florida Container Terminal. They do not have enough land in order to help move the volumes of product and containers that they have. So they had removed some land from Pomtoc, they gave it over, and then, it's a 10 acres over here, and then gave it back. But regardless of the fact, it's just the way it's up, the land restrictions within the port, they just don't have enough to spread out to be able to service a lot quicker. Recently, last week or maybe a week prior to that, South Florida Container shut down completely, could not release any containers at all because the fiber optic cables were cut into their operation. So they were dead. They were shut down for days. There's certain things that you can't control. But when it comes to the congestion and the truckers coming in, I know because I've heard every story. I've sat with those truckers, a round table of 52 trucking company owners. We were there for several days, talking about issues and trying to have a happy medium. The one thing that we have to come to conclusion here is that what might benefit one, the other one may not like because it restricts a lot of their movements and freedom. So unfortunately, the trucking community, as in drayage, don't want the appointment system because it kind of constrains them as to I can't divert here, I can't divert there, I can't go by and swing this up, or I can't pick this up and drop this on my way, because it restricts their freedom of how they can move within that window of So but it'll benefit a lot on the terminal side. It'll help control how they can do it. Longer gates have been discussed as at that exhaustedly as to going to a pier pass operation such as LA, trying to go into the 24-hour operation and reducing the amount during the peak hours during the day, and then have the trucks be on the night, right? So yeah, so you have that you have those that have been given before. So we've talked about pier pass operations, and now the pier pass, in order to go on a pier pass, volumes have to be justified. We're not where LA has. We're looking at 7 to 8, 9 million containers a year. And if I may be short on those numbers because I haven't seen the statistics in a year, but you're looking at those numbers of the volumes of containers that are coming in. I know they're dropped because of COVID and because of all the issue with the trade wars with China and stuff like that. But in order to help alleviate the congestion on these ports, I think if one of the things that would help immensely would be an appointment system. And it could be something that maybe, I think Carlos, we talked about this, or I suggest, it could be something that it could be a pilot program that is subsidized and see how it works, first 6 months, see how it works and see how that flow starts to pick up. I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest things to get in there. Now on to support the driver's side, a lot of the terminals, don't let you do double moves while you're inside the terminal. You have to get right back in line. So there's a good way of us being able to say, well, this, by having an appointment system, it frees up their operation and allows that driver to pre-schedule an appointment right after he does a pickup. So there's a lot of ways of working around that, to do double moves, to do double pickups, to pick up an empty, to drop a full, and then do that roundabout while they're in there. So that's just my thought by having the various meetings. I was very involved with the issues that we were having at Port Everglades with the 2 terminals there, that they actually did a work stoppage. They actually stopped for 3 days the operations, and no container moves out of Port Everglades to the terminals of PET and FIT did not move for 3 days because no truckers wanted to move it. So it was to the point of getting them to the table to be able to discuss the options. And a lot of it was, and at that time, even the Port Everglades was the only port at that time charging scale fees. So, it gets to where we're at. So I just wanted to go on record and give you my input as to where I see and how I've been involved with the drayage guys. Is I think an appointment system would probably be the easiest way and probably the quickest way to actually, help alleviate the congestion on the terminals, not on the ports, at the terminals. So, and I know Juan Flores had a question that he wanted to go ahead and make a comment. Juan?
Thank you, Lady Chair. Carlos, just going back to your comment, and this is kind of summarizing what everybody talked about, just with the new commissioners coming into play, the education that has to occur and happen. I don't know what a truck does. I don't know why it's here, and then queuing up also with the COVID, it kind of makes for a perfect storm, and maybe it's an opportunity to engage the ports, maybe Port Everglades, Miami, Palm Beach, as it relates to kind of like scenario planning. So things will potentially get worse, right? So as it relates to the cruise industry, I think we see what's happened from that standpoint. And the cargo perhaps wasn't getting the love, if you're cruising, you're coming out of South Florida, and for good reason. But, with the COVID that hit and everything that happened, it's cargo that really picked up the lion's share and kind of saved the financial stability, quite frankly, of the ports, right? And there's revenue coming in, but as it relates to some sort of strategic plan, some sort of scenario planning for that bad things will happen, and all the 3 ports working as a conglomerate, versus independently. Not to say that they don't, but it is a competitive business, as Barbie knows, and it's cutthroat at times too, especially with the trucking. But now, as we come in with the a vaccine, right, and we talk about pharma, as it relates to a pharma airport that we have, that has to be distributed, right? That has to get kind of not only South Florida, but to the Americas. How is that going to be played out? And so it's kind of an interesting kind of opportunity for us, because these pandemics, these bad things will happen. When what hits the fan, how are we going to kind of be nimble, and how are we going to get that market share? And I think it's one of those things where you cannot be working independently. And they've had a number of these calls with Lester Sola and Juan Carrilla about where the port is, where it's at financially and all that. And this is something maybe we can do. Paul Clark from FTAC on the truck size and weight side, Ken Armstrong, when they kind of did the outreach about the trucking industry and what they did. I don't know if there's an opportunity to kind of re-engage them again as it relates to the education. And as cliche as that might sound, And you know, but again, we're preaching to the choir, and not everybody understands what a truck does, the connectivity to the port, to the airport, you know, and these new commissioners coming in, right? They don't know. I mean, maybe it's a healthcare issue, maybe it's a work issue as it relates to job placement. And you know, I'm a little biased, I think we all are, but transportation kind of fits all those gaps. And it might be an opportunity to kind of, you know, if we do it for the SFRTA, the regional rail passenger, you know, where all the counties are working together, we could easily do that for, not only the airports, but, you know, more specifically the ports, you know, as it relates to goods movement, right? You know, and it was funny because Willie kind of mentioned, you know, well, is the route's pretty expensive now, you know, well, you know, you talk to Barbie says, yeah, expensive with cows in the middle. You know, you know, she used to tell me that the worst thing that would happen is a trucker would hit a cow, you know. And Kevin, I did want to make note of this for the record. Willie did say Game Boy, my Nintendo. I haven't heard that phrase in years, and he just dated himself. So thank you, Willie.
I almost said Atari. I almost said Atari. So just
okay, I was gonna say Commodore 64, but
he read about it.
That's all I got, gentlemen and lady.
What does everyone think about some of the, or does anyone here have any experience with the technological solutions that are being used by some of the ports? I know there's a rollout at Port Everglades at one or two of the terminals, like e-Advent and some of those. Has anyone had any experience with any of them? What is your awareness of how successful they are? Those are systems, by the way, if you're not familiar with them, that will create appointments, keep track of a container, let you know where in the queue it is, and also possibly enable a trucker to wait while another container is being brought to them for the return trip.
John makes a good point because, you know, remember that, you know, there's the terminals and the port. And if you're talking to BSO, you know, the Broward Sheriff's Office, they don't let those truckers come into the port until the ship is there. So you have guys, truckers kind of queuing and going around in circles, you know, outside the perimeter saying, scoot, you know, get out of here, because it's a security issue. Why are you camped out here? Well, I'm waiting for the ship to get in, but no, you got to get out of here. So, and as it relates to the network and Carlos's FDOT's point of view, well, then there's more congestion because there's a guy going in circles, or a gal, mind you know, going in circles, queuing up and saying, "Oye, you know, where's my load?" You know.
Yeah.
So that becomes an issue.
In fact, Willie made a great point yesterday about, because you had asked what happens with folks when they come down to pick up a load and it's not ready. And of course, a good corporate citizen like Costa and their bigger operation has a facility for them. Most of the other operations down there, from what I've seen and understand, don't. So they basically queue up along the street. It's a little easier in Homestead, but not as, nobody's any happier about it. They'll queue up along perhaps 167th Tennessee Drive, or they'll queue up along Chrome on the side. They'll do the same thing, obviously headed over for the port. And it's gotten complicated. Those people have been doing that for years in Hialeah, but as trucks got bigger, it became more and more complicated. It's one thing to queue up with a 40-foot container, another thing with a 53-foot trailer and a rig attached to it. So it gets tricky. The idea of some of these cyber workarounds, like the technology solutions, is that they will give you the window Barbie talked about, and they'll also try and match that with a container that you pick up to return. And then, of course, you could be directed to a place to wait for that pickup if it's not ready for you just yet. So I didn't know if anyone has any experience with those kinds of systems, if they work the way they're supposed to. Do they break down like everything else when there's a crunch? What has anyone found?
I guess I mean, limited experience, John.
Yeah, I wondered if anyone else in the.
Yeah.
I've been asking around, and a number of the people that I talked to, King Ocean at Port Everglades, one of the guys at Seaport that asked not to be quoted by name, but said, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea to us, but we don't need it so badly because we have a system just like that of our own. Most of them, when we talk informally to the people at the ports, their question is, who's paying for it? And how are you going to get people to participate? It's one of those things that's great if everybody's using it, but if only a couple of percent or an unreliable percentage are using it, it's kind of like the cell phone waiting lot at the airport. Are you going to be the one sucker that uses it while everyone else is hogging the spaces?
I'd be interested, John. Do we know if Long Beach or Savannah or the other markets are using that kind of technology?
Yeah, apparently, is Barbie still online? She might be. I see her muted. Apparently, they're using all of that. So they're using the appointment system, they're using the text system, and they're using the 24-hour Peer Pass system. A bunch of people here have asked about the Peer Pass system. The fellow that was going to be on our committee, and if I can remember his last name, I'd be doing good. Aaron Sebia, I think is his name with Consolidated. He was really giving us quite a lot of information on that, George. When we, when we went and talked to him with the Medley study, that was a few years ago, saying, why can't they extend the hours? When we asked the people at the port why they don't extend the hours, they said because the trucker has no place to bring the goods. So if he comes and picks it up at 2 in the morning at Port Miami, the warehouse is closed when he gets there. So where does he park with his load? Now he's got a valuable load and not just an empty truck, and he's got more responsibility. So it really, I don't want to make it sound like it's an unsolvable problem. It's definitely solvable. And it may be solvable in a way that we couldn't solve it 3 or 4 years ago because we didn't have this level of technology where you actually have not just a cell phone that is connected to your private system or to something like whatever you use, but you've got your company, the terminal operating company, and you've got the port possibly as the platform for this. And that's something that was not possible 3 years ago.
I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense because, you know, we shouldn't wait for volumes to become so astronomical that now we're you know, we need it desperately. It should be something that we begin to implement now. And honestly, you know, I think that markets like Miami, we're in that sweet spot where we should be looking to have our ports, our airports, become much more of a smart, you know, a smart platform, you know, and I think once that happens, then the private sector will automatically integrate. And you know, and then you have a much more seamless. Go ahead, George. I know you're trying to get in here, George.
Well, you're muted.
You know, for some reason, I'm not able to find that little hand, so I had to raise my real hand. I know that I've asked this before from presenters in the county, but I'm still wondering what happened to that study that it was commissioned, that the Board of County Commissioners authorized for the inland port option. And, you know, what I like about that, I mean, obviously I liked it because Medley was in one of the locations that probably would have been considered, you know, because of the rail connectivity, is because something like that will actually allow some of these technologies to even work better. For instance, you know, rail moving containers could happen a lot at nighttime, and they could be ready for daytime transportation to other places. So you have more of a actual number of hours that you can be doing something with freight. And obviously, being in West Miami, you know, you'll be closer to US 27. Well, actually, it will be on almost on US 27. That is like a designated freightway, I-75 and so on. So besides that, when we talk about technology, it's not only the use of apps, which, we all know that that could be very useful, but also the opportunity to build a state-of-the-art storage facilities, like perhaps, using better equipment for, movement of containers and higher, in the case of refrigerated or other type of, storage, that could be possibly higher buildings. I've had many demonstrations of those technologies. So the idea of an inland port, to me, it made a lot of sense. However, nobody, even when we were having, people from Port Miami attending these meetings, it seemed that this thing just got lost in the shuffle.
It got rolled into a couple of the others tentatively, George. One of the, it got rolled into the look for, like a few ways. One is we had identified, as you remember, as a really good site, the area that's now being used for a soccer field, just on the north side, as you know, of 74th, south side of the landfill. That is a very large tract, but for some reason, the whole thing has been pulled out without, and only a little portion's needed for the soccer field. So that's not off the table. Now what's happened is, as part of a couple of other studies, they're looking at what to do. Could they combine container storage, maybe some truck parking, maybe the inland port, et cetera. And also we were hoping way back when you're talking about the study to be able to connect it by rail. Almost all the private property became prohibitively expensive at $1 million an acre. We couldn't do, we looked at Lowell Dunn sites in there, but he doesn't want to sell for any price. And then it becomes difficult to carve out, something of substance, substantial enough to do that. Then you have to bring the rail in, and what guaranteed usage can you provide to the rail? The rail goes in terms of usage. How many cars can you guarantee? And we weren't sure what could be guaranteed there. So a lot of that started to fall into some of these other studies, like the major study Carlos was talking about, which is the countywide study. And then it starts to be looked at by the supply and demand study. And then the question is, lately, can we combine multiple entities for these? If you have Port Miami looking for one thing, Florida Department of Transportation looking for another, and I'll go ahead, Carlos, and stick my neck out and say that the Department of Transportation, as I've been told, isn't in the business to make a profit on it. They don't have to make a return on investment. Their return is serving the traveling public and serving the trucking industry and everyone else. The county, on the other hand, does have to get a return on property that they give up to other uses. So if the property is controlled by the airport and they want to lease it for use for truck parking or anything else, they have to be able to show a return on that, just like the they would.
And those are good points, except that I thought that a lot of this exercise and the approach that you described would have been the traditional approach, that you build it and so on. But another way would be more like to make it like a private public partnership, or perhaps say, here at the Port of Miami, we have the need to have this freight or containers and so on, and then by perhaps making a commitment to have certain movement, you would allow the private industry to come back with a proposal because, I've heard both sides, I heard this side and the other side. And what basically, from when you hear from the private side, what they want to have is some idea or guarantees, like if they come up with a plan like that, the port will be on board to do that. So by creating and making clear, for what the needs were, it was more like a needs study rather than to say, we're going to buy so many acres and do this. And, because that approach, I almost would have been having an eminent domain powers to do that, because if you have an owner that's not willing to sell, then where's this going to go?
There's less property than you would think, though, that's available for that kind of use. One thing I will point out is what we're up against is the property, almost all of that's privately owned, unless we go into the agency-owned, department-controlled, county-owned property, which really does make the most sense. The thing there is, if it's privately owned, they're looking to return on every dollar that they put into it. An inland port doesn't necessarily return in that way. That'll give Port Miami throughput, which is a return in a different department, a different pocket, if you will. If you take 100 acres or 50 acres or 30 there by the landfill, by the water and sewer treatment facility, et cetera, and you pull that out, you can do it with county-owned land, pay reasonable market rate for the land, bring in an operator that would handle certain things. They can make a margin on it, and it works. The difficulty there is we just have to show the need, like you're saying, to demonstrate it conclusively. If you go to a private developer that owns the land, they're going to want to put as much building on the land as they can. We can't even get a private developer to put a few extra parking spaces on their land for staging trailers. The attitude of almost every one of them is, at $1 million an acre, we want to put 40% to 50% coverage of the building. We'll put just enough trailer parking to put it in front of your docks, to circulate 110 to 120 feet out from the building, make a complete turn, and that's it. They won't give you an extra 10 spaces. If they do, it's going to cost you $75 to $100 a month for that space. And that's, it's a good, I'm sorry, it'll cost you more than that. It'll cost you 50 cents a foot on top of your lease. So it really starts to, that's moved up a lot in the last couple of years. So turning to the private industry to do it for us is difficult. To do it, though, as some kind of a work together, where you've got the county providing maybe publicly owned land that's not being used well, you got the DOT coming in with a contribution to do what's necessary to make it work. Then the developers start to get on board saying, we can't provide the parking for our facility next door or down the street, but we'll support you on this effort. And you start to get a whole consortium of people. We go in with something different than we had 4 years ago, when we got this shut down right away. We were shut down in favor of, as I said, a soccer field that's only serving a few people and nobody now. Hardly anybody's played on that soccer field in the last several years, much less since COVID. It's kind of like our park and ride facility. So as we start to look at these, you start to say, well, where are the people employed? Who's employing them? Who are the potential allies for this? And try and get a consortium of support for it that's significant enough that we compete against these other uses that are ending up with these properties, these drivers clubs. Because when the drivers club says, we're giving you an economic benefit of this property that's $60 million, and nobody does the math, or they don't understand the math, a $30 million lease rate for 30 years is $1 million a year. And you've heard me say this before. The 140 acres that the county leased to the drivers club, which was usable, workable, developable, road, water, sewer, curb, and gutter, everything. That's $1 million an acre land. They leased that for 30 years for $1 million a year. That's 17 cents a foot. We lease that property all day long for $250 to $350 a foot. That's fractional. So if we come in with our group and say, not only will we pay you more money and we'll give you 17 cents, we'll give you 50 cents, we'll give you $1 a foot for it, for God's sake. But not only that, you've got the economic benefit of all the citizens that are using that for their livelihood. And you've got the economic benefit that the port is able to now advertise something that they have a place to put this. Even going back one step to what we talked about the technology, when you spend the money to do that, you put this facility up. Port Miami has something to advertise. They're only 516 acres. That's tiny. But they could be a little jewel compared to everything else in the world if it's functioning and operating really well. Like we've all learned, a 32-foot clear ceiling with good forklifts is functional, and you can replace a 200,000 square foot building with a 50,000 square foot building if you have higher ceilings, flatter floors, and better efficiency. We can make a 500-acre Port Miami equivalent to a 2,200-acre Port Everglades with better efficiency with these systems that work between the inland area, the inland port, and the port, and things that prevent congestion and mix up at each end of it. So, and that's kind of a long answer to your question, but the answer right now, I see Carlos is back on the line, is that we've sort of begun to put the inland terminal as a consideration in all this thing without derailing it. We don't want to derail the truck parking, but on the other hand, at some point with the supply and demand study, and you start to put that together with the need of Port Miami, and they're doing a separate study, and we, as part of the tunnel study there for the efficiency of moving things. And when we put all these things together, we can show hopefully a need in a way that we weren't able to show it 3 years ago. Is that sort of?
And if I may interject,
Yeah, please.
In terms of the discussion point, the cargo terminals, you know, I'll make, I guess, a clarifying point. You know, we as an agency understand the limitations that Port Miami has, right? I think Madam Chair alluded to that point, the landlord and the landlord-port dynamics with their terminal operations and so forth. And, you know, at the end of the day, what I'm being asked is somewhat difficult given the lack of jurisdiction from our end. And it's certainly any solution or any potential solution, whether it's a pilot project, some type of subsidy, it's going to have to go through Port Miami. We need to work with Port Miami. That's going to be one of the other steps that I have on my plate, to reach out to our friends and partners at Port Miami. I just want to get a feel from your perspective. And you know, we haven't heard anything new in terms of potential appointment system, but also as Mr. Vice Chair pointed out, Mr. Flores, you know, there's going to be on a similar track. There's going to be an opportunity with new elected officials on the educational piece. And I think, you know, not to throw it back in this committee, I think you all, as an advisory committee to the MPO, the Miami-Dade TPO, which has a membership composed of some of those very new commissioners that are going to be coming online, I think you're going to play a pivotal role on the educational piece. And I encourage you to certainly keep that line of communication open with the new commissioners, especially if you're appointed, but the new commissioners, that reappointment or potential reappointment may come about sooner than expected. But yes, so that's a very good point in terms of taking advantage of the new elected officials that may be coming in to really educate them, to let them know how important logistics in the cargo business is. Very good points. One of the other things, as I mentioned, I'm going to do is, you know, in the next few weeks or so, we're going to reach out to Port Miami. We kind of started that process just to get a better understanding of what's happening on their end in terms of infrastructure, potential project, and some of the other initiatives that may very well alleviate these terminal operating issues. And we understand, again, we understand the limitations they have. As I said, very difficult to hear from my own leadership when I've explained the dynamics of the landlord ports in the state of Florida, And the limitations that I've sort of used the real estate analogy, landlord, you rent a facility, you don't get to decide, what paintings they're going to be able to, hang on their walls, or what furniture they're going to pick, right? I've kind of used that analogy to kind of drive the point. Nevertheless, I'm hearing
Chichuli.
Well, we need to work with our partners. Let's work with our committees. Let's work with our ports, and let's come up with some potential ideas for solutions to alleviate the problems. And that's essentially the reason why I came to this committee with this cryptic or somewhat, I guess, in a way misleading statement. But I think you get the point, and I thank you for the opportunity to discuss the subject. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the feedback. And we'll continue talking to you folks. With that, I have nothing further. I think we're hitting almost at 4 o'clock, and we have other additional business to conduct to finalize the meeting.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Always a pleasure. Okay, so since we are pressed for time, I mean, we got 3 minutes, so I'm going to put Kevin on the spot here because I'm making him go fast. So old and new business, Kevin, the FTAC attendance report, and our next meeting.
FTAC attendance report, you can see on the screen, everybody's in good standing. We have 2 more meetings for the rest of the year. Next meetings would be, one more meeting for the for the remainder of the year, because we do not meet in December. And as you can see on the agenda, I put that the next meeting date is November 12th, which is a Thursday. As you know, we meet on the Wednesdays, second Wednesday of each month, but second Wednesday of the month, second Wednesday in November 2020 is Veterans Day, and office is closed, and as many other government offices are. So, giving a heads up that for that meeting, we'll be meeting the next day, same time, same batch channel, same batch. Well, let me phrase that. Depending on the governor's executive order, we may be meeting in person. We don't know that yet, but we'll be meeting somehow, some way on November 12th. So I'll say same bat channel. I mean bat time, not necessarily channel. And so that'll be it for anybody. And then I already spoke to you all individually regarding for the ones whose positions are in flux because of the upcoming elections for your particular appointing committee members. I won't discuss that now, but I'm just putting that for the record that I did call of you, each of you who have appointing members up for re-election. I did call each of you individually.
Yep, definitely. All right. Any questions for Kevin regarding any of the issues going forward regarding, if you haven't spoken to him and if you know that your county commissioner, I think Kevin would have known who's coming up there. Make sure you reach out to Kevin so we know when you guys know what the process will be going forward. Once the elections take place, then we'll kind of know where all the chips fall. With that being said, any member have any reports they want to go ahead and share for the committee, just a heads up or anything like that? Do anybody have any events or anything like that they want to go ahead and promote? Or I know events have been a little bit, crazy because of COVID, and the only thing I want to go on record is making sure to tell everybody stay safe and sanitize people. I mean, we, I wish, this would have never happened, but it kind of gives us an opportunity to get reacquainted with our families really good, whether you like it or not. So, I think it's unfortunate, but it's reality, and we'll eventually get back to a new norm. I do want to say that if the new meeting locations or anything like that, I want to be able to make sure that I offer up our conference room here at our facilities. We can hold up to about 12, but we can put in other chairs in there. But I just want to know that there is, if the meetings start to resume in person, I'll make sure to put my office out there to be able to host at least one of the meetings if need be. I do have a lot of space here, and I want to be able to invite you guys to my house again.
Yes, I will be keeping in contact with you as the end of this month comes close, and we'll see as to the governor's executive order is. If it's renewed, then we'll let's call it a year and then reconvene in January.
In January.
If it's not extended, then I will most likely jump your offer, but we'll
Okay.
see.
Perfect.
Okay.
Not a problem. Well, with that being said, everybody have a safe Halloween, because that's the next holiday coming up. Make sure you guys vote. It's important. And talk to you everybody on next month. All right.
Okay.
Meeting
Thank-
adjourned.
Thank you,
very
Barbie.
much. Meeting
Thank you,
adjourned.
guys.
Time 4:02 p.m.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Great
Bye,
job.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.